everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be bringing you a recent reads video. So I haven't talked about any of the books I've read so far this year in a very long time. In fact, it's been a while since I've talked about books in general, and this is a booktube channel, so it's about time that I finally got around to it. As of right now, I've read 36 books this year, and I'm not going to go into detail with every single book I've read. So instead what I'm doing is talking about the books that I enjoyed most, and I'm leaving links down below to all of the books that I read for team reads because I already wrote out reviews for all of those, so it's much easier if I don't talk about those books and instead let you read my reviews. And then there are some other books that I am just leaving out because I really wasn't that interested in them, and so I'm not going to waste time talking about them and being like, well, these books weren't that good, because then what's the point of that? I'm just wasting your time and energy to talk about books that I really didn't like that much. So I have been in a bit of a book slump. I wish I could be reading more, but I do have a decent sum of titles to discuss with all of you, so without further ado, we are going to dive right in and get started. The first book I have here is actually representative of a few, and that is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. So I finally got around to reading the entirety of the Lunar Chronicles series towards the beginning of this year, and oh my goodness, am I so glad I finally got around to reading this series because it is phenomenal. If you're unfamiliar with the Lunar Chronicles, I would be surprised because it's a very popular series on BookTube, but essentially it's a set of fairy tale retellings that builds upon each other. So Cinder is the first in the series, and obviously, as you can tell, it is a Cinderella retelling. Scarlet is the second in the series, and it is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. The third book in the series is Cress, and that is a Rapunzel retelling. And the fourth book in the series is Winter, which is a Snow White retelling. And then there is a book in between that called Ferris, which is a short story from the point of view of the main villain within this series, Queen Lavanna, and she's essentially meant to be the evil queen. And I did read that story as well, although it definitely wasn't my favorite out of the entire series. I think Cress was definitely my favorite. I love Cress and Thorn together. They're two of my absolute favorite characters within this series, so obviously I really love that book a lot, and I think that tends to be the general consensus. I absolutely loved Heartless when I read it, and I knew I always wanted to get around to reading the Lunar Chronicles, so fortunately enough, last summer there was a sale on the box set of the Lunar Chronicles from Book Outlet, and the entire box was like $35, and normally it was around $100, so I knew I had to get my hands on these books and read them, and they were sitting on my shelf for about 6 months before I finally did get around to them. But I think it was nice to get to binge through a series because I think it kept me going to read one book and then another book and then another book, and this series was just so much fun to read and so suspenseful, and I love how each story builds upon each other, and there were so many twists and turns and things that just made me so incredibly engaged that it definitely helped to take me out of my book slump a little bit. The next two books that I have here are both by William Shakespeare. The first is Macbeth and the other is King Lear. So I read both of these in my AP Lit class, and they were some of the last few books of the year that we read. I absolutely love these two, and they are by far probably two of my favorite Shakespeare plays of all time. I have to say though, out of the two, King Lear is definitely my favorite. I love the family dynamics within this story. I love all of the metaphors within this story and all of the connections within this story. It's just so amazing how brilliant Shakespeare is, and I feel like I never really got around to realizing that until I read Macbeth and King Lear, because I feel like I was really able to go into depth with these stories and the way that Shakespeare crafted them in a way that I was never able to before, and I think that's because I had a teacher that was just so brilliant and just taught these stories so spectacularly that not only were they incredibly entertaining to read, but it was incredibly insightful as well. And I feel like I hadn't had that experience yet with the other Shakespeare plays that I had read, because it just felt like we were reading them for the plot and not so much a greater significance. And that's one of the things I loved about AP Lit, is it was always about the greater significance. And so I feel like I was getting so much more out of these stories than I would have had I been learning them under any other teacher. Shakespeare is just incredibly brilliant, and my AP Lit teacher as an end of the year gift actually got me a full collection of William Shakespeare. So I'm really excited to get to dive into that massive behemoth, hopefully sometime soon, and read more Shakespeare. But until then, I definitely recommend for those of you who haven't read Shakespeare to read Macbeth and King Lear, because they are some really fantastic plays, and it's so much better to go into them without knowing anything at all and then just gradually learn more as the story goes on. But I think it is important to also understand the history and what's going on at the time, because that helps to sort of clarify some of the things that go on within the plot that may not make sense to us because of the way that we operate in our everyday world. But these two plays are absolutely fantastic, and I definitely recommend that you check them out. So the next read I have here is The Backstages and the Theater of the Ancients by Andy Mientus, illustrated by Ryan Singh. So this is the second book in a series of middle grade graphic novels that is actually adapted from a comic book series. So The Backstages follows a group of techies that help to do all of the behind the scenes work for their high school theater program. So they're doing all the lighting and set design and costuming and all of that type of stuff that happens behind the scenes to help all of the actors put on musicals each year at their high school. So the musical that is being put on in this novel is Tammy, which is obviously meant to be Tommy in our real world. I love this series so much because it deals with a lot of the fantastical things that go on backstage, and it feels very much Andy, and I absolutely love and adore Andy Mientus. I think he's incredibly talented and incredibly underappreciated within the theater community because he has done so much that I feel like so many people don't know about, and I'm just continually astounded by all the amazing things that he has done. One of the things that I really love about this series is that it's incredibly diverse. One of the really great pieces of representation that we get to see within this series, particularly within this book, is characters that are hard of hearing, and so you get to learn about sign language and what it's like to be deaf and the representation of deaf people within the theater, and I think that's really beautiful and really special, and a large part has to do with Andy's experience being in Deaf West Spring Awakening, which I really love. So it's great to see that representation. There's also plenty of other characters that are incredibly diverse, so I feel like this is a book that the YA community would really love, or a series that the YA community would really love, because of course this is the second book. I did read the first one and really love that one as well, and I'm super excited for all the books that are going to be coming in the future because Andy is an absolutely amazing author, and this series is just so fun and lighthearted and exciting and thrilling and uplifting that I knew I wanted to get my hands on it when it came out this year. Next, we have another book that I am very excited to be discussing, and that is The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. So this is the first book in the Eldest Curses series, which follows Magnus and Alec. This book takes place after the events of City of Last, so technically during City of Fallen Angels, and it follows Magnus and Alec on their vacation, and then things start to go awry, and so they obviously have to get involved, and the series then sort of continues from there. So I know a lot of people weren't particularly excited about this book because it was taking place in the past, so we already knew what happened to these characters, we already knew their fate after reading Queen of Air and Darkness, so it was like, how exciting could this book possibly be? What is it that we could possibly find out that we don't already know yet? But oh my goodness, the ending of this book had me shaking. I was just so in shock with the way that it ended, even though obviously like I know where the plot line or this cliffhanger that we're sort of given with ends up. I feel like there's so much more information that we get to find out, and we're finally finding out about a major plot point that I feel like we've had a lot of question marks being surrounded by for years. So I'm really excited about that. I love getting to see previous characters from other Shadowhunter series show up in this book, particularly Helen and Alan. We get to see how they met, which is really beautiful and really special. And I think the biggest thing for me that I really loved about this book the most was the development of Alec's character. I feel like this book does a really good job sort of foreshadowing where it is that Alec ends up, sort of explaining it, getting more into detail, because while Alec is one of our main characters in the Mortal Instruments series, he is sort of put off to the side because obviously Clary and Jace are much more at the forefront of the plot and what is going on within the series, that it's nice to get to see more development on Alec, especially considering what it is that happens to him in Queen of Air and Darkness. I think it provides explanation for that. It provides sort of an understanding for the reader as to why he ends up in that position, and sort of helps you as the reader to see him fit in the position that he gets in Queen of Air and Darkness. I'm trying to say all of this without giving away spoilers, and I feel like it's kind of obvious, but I'm just gonna maybe leave it there and say that you need to read Red Scrolls of Magic. It's absolutely wonderful. I had the best time reading it. I loved getting to read more about Magnus and Alec because they're obviously two of my favorite characters, and I'm really excited to see where this series goes next. The next book that I have here is another one that I absolutely loved and adored, and that is Again But Better by Christine Riccio. So this is Christine, aka Pullin' Bananas Books' debut novel, and oh my goodness, do I love this book so much. Essentially, the whole plot of the story has to deal with travel abroad and making mistakes and being able to go back and rectify them. So it's like a contemporary story with a bit of a fantastical twist in a way, and it's so cute and fluffy, and I feel like it really is just like the ultimate like novel for anyone who loves to read, who loves the YA community, because it just has all of these things that are so beautiful that the YA community really embraces, like weird character names and just like all the fluffy, cute, contemporary romance stuff, like so many good things. There's an abundant amount of references. Like this book is Christine's heart and soul, and I can see so much of her within this story, and it truly is just the most perfect book for me to be reading at the moment, because I am going to be going off to college. I'm going to be in a completely new atmosphere, surrounded by completely different people that I'm used to being surrounded by. I'm going to be having to be confronted with a whole bunch of different perspectives that I haven't been exposed to, and it's going to be a very turbulent point in my life, but I feel like this story is going to be one that is going to be a constant reminder to me of getting out of my comfort zone, of trying to make friends, of trying to network and make connections, and trying to push myself even if I am scared and afraid, because I'm not going to get any do-overs. And so I really appreciated this story and the messages that it sent, because they're messages that I really needed. And this is actually a book that I'm going to be bringing with me to college, so that if I ever am scared, if I ever am afraid, I can look at this book and I can have a reminder to be strong and to keep going, because I want to have a strong future, and I don't want to have some of the things that happen to our main character in this story to happen to me, because she does have some blunders, does make some mistakes, but she grows and she learns from them, and I think that's really beautiful and really important. So I very much love this story, and I definitely recommend that you all pick it up. The next read that I have here is one that I've been wanting to get to for a very long time, and that is The Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure by William Goldman. Oh my goodness, have I been wanting to read The Princess Bride for like so long. I first watched the movie last summer in the middle of July, and I just absolutely fell in love with it, so I knew I needed to get my hands on the book. A lovely AP Lit teacher gifted this to me as part of winning an award for being an outstanding student in the English department, and so I obviously got a certificate, and then one of the things that I got was a book, and so I requested The Princess Bride, and she found me this gorgeous edition that has map in it and all of these beautiful illustrated pages and so much extra content. Like, this is the ultimate edition to get if you are a Princess Bride fan, because it has everything in it. So one of the things that actually annoyed me a lot about this book is that it's written in frame, so it's like a story within a story, and so you have William Goldman coming in and popping in at points and narrating parts of the story, because essentially the idea is that he just took The Princess Bride, the original story that was written by S. Morgenstern, and just completely rewrote it in order to be more fun and thrilling and exciting, because apparently it's like this really long story with a whole bunch of parts that are super irrelevant. But obviously I have to remember that none of that is true, and that William Goldman wrote this story for his two daughters. He asked them what it is that they wanted him to write next. One of his daughters said princess, the other said bride, and thus came to be The Princess Bride. But the way that he writes it in frame is so brilliant, because it feels so real. He's talking about like museums and all these things, and I was getting so confused, and then I had to remember that it like was written in frame and that none of it was actually real, and it was just like so annoying at points. I was like, come on Gabby, get it together. But I think that's really the beauty of this story, is that William Goldman makes it feel so real and so immersive, and that's just really beautiful, and I absolutely miss him so much because he did die, and that makes me really sad, because I know he has such an incredible legacy that he's left behind, and this book is definitely at the front of the list. The Princess Bride is actually being adapted into a musical, so I'm very excited to see where that goes, as much as I am very nervous about it. This book, I actually can't believe I'm saying this, I feel like I enjoyed the movie more than I enjoyed the book, and I feel like that's the first and only time that I'm ever going to say that I liked a movie more so than the book. But because I did watch the movie first, I fell in love with the way that that story was told. Reading the book was fun because there were new elements of the story that I wasn't familiar with, and it was exciting to get to read those, but there was other things where I was like, what? Like certain lines that were given to characters that are given to different characters in the movie, lines of dialogue in the movie that are super iconic that aren't in the book, and so I felt like because the Princess Bride movie is like so quotable, I was expecting all of those quotable lines in the book as well, and they weren't there, and I was really sad. But this book is absolutely spectacular. I am glad that I read it, but it definitely doesn't compare to the movie for me. I feel like the movie is just so magical in so many ways, but I do love this book and I will treasure it. The next book I have here is another Cassandra Clare book, and that is Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, with Sarah Rees Brennan, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Link, and Robin Wasserman. So this is another Shadowhunters anthology that essentially has a whole bunch of short stories compiled within it that are all from Brother Zachariah or Jem Carstairs' perspective. That was a bit of a spoiler, but I hope by now that we've all read The Infernal Devices, that we all know what it is that happens, because like if not, you're a little bit late. Whoops. I think that this is by far Cassie's best anthology yet. I know a lot of people don't like her short stories, like they're not that big of a fan of the Bane Chronicles or the Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy, just because it's not a full-length novel and it's also not Cassie writing on her own, so the writing style just doesn't feel the same. But I feel like Jem is the perfect character to follow, whereas like Magnus and Simon may not be the best characters for an anthology. I mean, Magnus I feel like could be another acceptable character, but I feel like Jem works perfectly because he's constantly around all the other Shadowhunters that we know and love, so we get to see from all their perspectives. So obviously he is sort of like the origin of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, because it does begin with Will, Jem, and Tessa, even though obviously like the Infernal Devices wasn't published first, it happens first. And so they're sort of the first set of Shadowhunters that we get to see within the Shadowhunter Chronicles. And so from there, then you get to follow the children of Will and Tessa, and then you get to follow all the characters from the Mortal Instruments and all of the characters then from the Dark Artifices, and then everything that happens after Queen of Air and Darkness. And so Jem is a perfect character because he's present while all of that is happening, and so it's a really great way to be able to fit in all the characters. And I think this book also made me so much more excited for the Last Hour series, because I've gotten to know these characters a little bit more. I have a little bit of a backstory for them, and I think I'm going to be very interested to see what shenanigans they get up to in that series. And I think that this anthology did a really good job of previewing them. There are so many really, really beautiful stories within this book that I can't even tell you which one is my favorite. I love the one following Anna Lightwood. I love getting to see her character and her character development, and I'm excited to see more of her in the last hours. I love the one that was written during the time of World War II. I thought it was incredibly interesting to see how warlocks and Shadowhunters were involved in that major conflict. I think the historical aspect of that was very interesting to me. Some of the short stories that take place after Queen of Air and Darkness were obviously very appealing to me to sort of know what's going on, and absolutely made me scream my head off. Oh my goodness. There are so many really, really wonderful stories in here that I just had so much fun reading, and I don't think there was a single one to me that felt any better than the rest. I feel like I loved them all equally, and each for a different reason, and I just had so much fun reading this collection of short stories, and it just makes me so excited for Cassie and all of her upcoming works, because she's just such a phenomenal writer, and I just feel like she finally hit the mark with her short story collection by following Jem as a character, because he just made for the perfect anthology, and I think he was just the perfect character's perspective to be able to connect us to a whole bunch of other characters within the Shadowhunter Chronicles. The next read that I have here is Nexus by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. This is the final book in the Andromeda saga. So it has been a while since I first read Zenith. I originally read the arc, I think back in the fall of my junior year, before it ever actually came out. So I remember very, very little about what it is that happened in that first book. So when I went to pick up Nexus, I was like, what happened? And then the book itself did a very good job of sort of refreshing me and providing me like the necessary detail that I needed to know to get through the rest of the story. This book did have some twists and turns that I thought were interesting, and I definitely was excited reading it. I don't think this book was necessarily as good as the first. I feel like I enjoyed the first book a lot more, but I feel like that's also because I was a lot more excited for it, and I feel like the second book just sort of like came out and I just like went and got my hands on it a little bit later. I didn't get to go to the book signing because I was feeling run down and I was busy with like AP tests and things, so I just didn't have the hype surrounding this book that I feel like I did for the first one that made me really excited to read it. But I still did love this conclusion. I'm still incredibly proud of Sasha and Lindsay for creating this world. I'm glad that I read this book. I just am feeling sort of ambivalent about it, I think, for the large part just because there wasn't that hype and anticipation surrounding it, but I am glad that I read it. I am proud of Sasha and Lindsay and all the work that they put into creating this story, and I'm very excited to see what comes next for them. And lastly, the final book that I'm going to be discussing with all of you today is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. So I have started rereading the Harry Potter series. I am currently about halfway through Half-Blood Prince, and oh my goodness, have I had so much fun rereading Harry Potter. I've been in a bit of a book slump again recently. It's just kind of been like a persistent book slump where I've been reading on and off, and I decided that I should reread Harry Potter, and I'm so glad that I did because I've had so much fun rereading this series that I am going to be filming a Harry Potter Get to Know Me video where I talk about all things Harry Potter. So if you guys have any Harry Potter related questions that you want to ask me in order to understand my Harry Potter preferences, like which character do I like more, stuff like that that has to do with like opinions about Harry Potter, leave those questions down below because I'm going to be answering them in a video. I have some other basic ones that I've created, like what my Patronus is and what my Hogwarts house is and what my Ilvermorny house is, like all of those good things. So like Harry Potter fast facts about me, like those type of questions. Leave those down below and you'll find out more about my Harry Potter opinions, because originally I was going to film like 7 videos where I talked about my thoughts on all 7 of the books, but I figured like you really would be more interested in knowing my thoughts just about the series in general than like each individual book, and it'd also be easier to film 1 video rather than 7, so I kind of changed what I was going to do. But I do really love this series. I'm really glad that I'm finally rereading it, and I'm definitely enjoying it the second time around because I feel like there's a lot more that I'm catching. I'm a lot more invested in the story, and I feel like I'm a lot more engaged as well. I'm not just reading it to read it, I'm reading it because I'm genuinely excited about the story and the characters and where the universe is going. So I've had a fun time rereading the series, and obviously there's just some magic about it that has absolutely just encapsulated me, especially this summer having the opportunity to go to the Wizarding World. And if you want to see my vlog of the Wizarding World and my experience in the Wizarding World, you can click the card or you can click the link down below in the description. They will both be there, and I think that magic has just made me very excited to reread the series, and obviously the same magic that has stolen the hearts of many people throughout the years, and I'm very glad to finally be a part of this fandom. Okay, that is it for my recent reads. There are plenty of books that I did not discuss, so one of the other things that I'm going to be linking down below is my Goodreads reading challenge, so you can see all the books I've read and my star ratings. If you do have any particular questions about thoughts about a particular book that I've read, let me know. But that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new one. Goodbye!